Breaking news, the U.S. cannot account for dozens of American-trained rebels sent into Syria to fight ISIS. We're back now with Democratic Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii. She serves on the Foreign Affairs and the Armed Services Committees, and she's also a veteran of the Iraq War. Congresswoman, you heard this report coming from Barbara Starr that U.S. officials believe the few Syrian rebels who have completed this training program that they've actually now scattered since 5 rebels were captured. Some of them never even made it to Syria in the first place. Is it time to abandon this $500 million program?
Brianna, I was just shaking my head as I was hearing that report from Barbara. It's clear that there's never really been a clear and intelligent strategy when you're talking about battling ISIS in Syria. And whatever limited strategy there was, namely this train and equip mission of these so-called moderate Syrian rebels, it was a fool's errand from the beginning. I voted against it when it came before us in Congress because I knew that it wouldn't work. The mind-boggling thing now is that not only have we spent, $500 million to train around 60 or so of these rebels who are now, no one knows exactly where they are. We've got folks back here at home, and this is what I think about. We've got folks here at home, veterans and service members, whose benefits and pay are being threatened, saying that there's not enough money, veterans not getting the care that they need. And meanwhile, we've spent over $8 million on each one of these so-called Syrian moderates that we've trained there.
What is it that you see about them? Is it that they're not willing, or they don't think the U.S. has their backs? What is it? You could look at any one of a number of things, but when I look at this, I see this roughly a platoon-sized element dropped into combat there to battle ISIS that we've poured all this money into, when right next to them, the irony is we have these Kurdish fighters who have proven to be the most effective, to be the most courageous, to have taken back key territory from ISIS in northern Iraq as well as in Syria. And what's happening now is that U.S. and NATO are standing by and supporting Turkey as Turkey bombs these same Kurdish fighters who have been that ground fighting force, the only ground fighting force effective against ISIS on the ground. Now that you have Turkey granting access to the U.S. to launch attacks out of southern Turkey, is there still a U.S. military force on the ground?
A U.S. military force on the ground in Syria?
No, in Turkey. Essentially, you're seeing these sorties that are being flown over Syria. Are you seeing, in a way, is this sort of a drip, drip, drip on the way to having U.S. forces in a region that Americans don't really want U.S. forces in?
Well, I think this is just, frankly, an indication of the lack of a clear strategy to defeat ISIS. The fact that you've got kind of this schizophrenic approach where you've got U.S. air support providing some cover and some assistance to these Kurdish fighters on the ground, but on the other hand, you've got the U.S. and NATO supporting Turkey, bombing these same fighters. It just makes absolutely no sense. Turkey is now touting the fact that they're now, after ISIS has been at this for over a year, now they're stepping up after they've essentially been assisting ISIS, allowing free passage through Turkey, both for their oil, for their fighters, for their supplies and their personnel, doing nothing as ISIS is continuing to conduct its activities. And now they're saying, okay, we're going to go against ISIS. They in a 3-day period, they targeted over 400 targets, Kurdish targets, and 3 ISIS targets within that same 3-day period of time. So, I see Turkey using this as an excuse to be able to go after the Kurds, our ground fighters on the ground, for their own political gain, rather than standing in solidarity with us against this enemy called ISIS.
You say the administration is talking to you when it comes to Iran. Are they talking to you about your concerns when it comes to ISIS and Syria?
We have had and continue to have discussions. Clearly, there's some disagreement on the best approach to actually have a clear and winning strategy to defeat ISIS, whether you're talking about Syria or whether you're talking about Iraq. I'm going to continue to advocate for what I think will work, and clearly what we've seen and what has come before us in Congress has not.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, thanks so much. Really appreciate you being with us. Thanks, Brianna. Aloha.
Aloha to you as well. We are getting in some new information about the search for Malaysia.